What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So do you remember how we talked a bit before in a video about the Switch kind of being overclocked by hackers and they kind of pushing the limits, and we were kind of waiting for some actual test or results? Well, it looks like we actually got some screenshots on like a before and after look for Doom. So we're going to check that out and kind of what some of the side effects were, because people are always worried about heat, but it was actually something else that is kind of limiting the system at that frequency. And we found out something else about Crackdown 3 that isn't exactly good for it, and it's super weird. It makes no sense for Microsoft, who has generally been pretty good with their online games, and that being kind of what they're leaning into. You're going to want to see this one. As always, guys, enjoy this video. Do hit the like button. It does help out. We're going to start with some quick news with Parasite Eve. Now, as we've seen a lot of Square Enix's trademarks start to surface and pop up, another one's kind of come up, and I looked back and I realized we have actually kind of talked about this before, as it was filed back in November, and I went back and a lot of other YouTubers talked about it as well, like Smash JT, for example. Yeah, Parasite Eve was also filed with a trademark from Square Enix in Europe, and that could mean that something is happening with Parasite Eve, because we've also seen several trademarks now from Square that included things like Secret of Mana, Final Fantasy Adventure. It's interesting to see if Square is maybe starting to look back at their back catalog, as we've talked about before, as they've talked about in their own interviews, that they could be wanting to look back at older games and make them either new, remastered, or maybe just put them on, like they could just take Parasite Eve just as an example and just throw it on something like the Switch eShop as is, right? People would buy that. I mean, Sega's doing that with their Sega Ages collection. They are fixing them up, but I think people would really jump at the idea of having something like Parasite Eve just like available. I would like to see them take it though and actually like remaster it like well, right? I mean, okay. We're seeing them with Final Fantasy VII Remake. I feel like Parasite Eve would kind of throw them through a loop as well, but it is a shorter game than 7 and obviously doesn't have the insane fan drive behind it. So maybe they could do something like that, or maybe they're just playing with trademarks, because as we're seeing, they've renewed it from what we can tell, or filed it in Europe. So we'll kind of see if they do anything else with that. I'm mostly focusing on that Secret of Mana collection though, because that seems a bit more, I guess, realistic right now. Also, if you've been waiting for that Nintendo Direct that's probably been announced by now, I guess, depending on when you're watching this, and the anticipation around the 13th being tomorrow, well, you're probably wondering what other games can be shown there, and retailers and even full-on companies now are having a hard time keeping quiet. We saw the Spyro collection, the Reignited trilogy, basically get put out there several times now, even by Activision themselves, and now it seems like Ubisoft is getting in on the action after they themselves have posted that Assassin's Creed 3, the remaster, appears to be heading to Switch, as there was a screenshot captured from their site that shows it here. Yes, you can see Switch. They put out a press release before that showed Xbox One, PS4, and PC. It's very possible that Nintendo wanted to hold off to put it in a Direct and say, hey, look, we have an Assassin's Creed game finally on the Switch that's not streamed through the internet. And that, of course, would be much better for a lot of people who don't like to stream stuff, and maybe you like Assassin's Creed 3 and you're excited that it's getting a remaster, and you maybe want to play it on the Switch because of obviously the portable aspect. Well, it looks like that's one of the worst kept secrets next to Spyro right now. So you could probably look forward to that, and we'll see if that is something that gets dropped in a Direct. Also, we have a new studio that has been announced and is open and everything. You're going to want to keep an eye on it because it has some pretty good talent there. For example, if you liked Sonic Mania, you're a big fan of it. I mean, it's like one of the best Sonic games we've had in a long time, especially if you consider the ratings and everything from like Metacritic. It's like one of the top Sonic games. Well, Christian Whitehead was actually one of the leads on it, created it and everything, and the engine that it ran on, the Retro engine. Well, Christian Whitehead announced on Twitter, as you're seeing here, that him and several others are going to be creating Evening Star Studios. And this is a studio that I think is going to allow them to work in tandem with, say, Sega on different games, where probably Sega will contract them out for maybe another Sonic game, or maybe they're just going to make their own game. Either way, I'm excited to see what they do. And they do mention a proprietary engine, which I assume is that Retro engine that was created. They're probably going to do maybe some 2D stuff. I'd like to see them take a shot at like a Sonic Adventure, but I mean, they're obviously very good and talented at making a 2D style game. We've seen Sonic. Maybe they'll do something else like a Rocket Knight or something, I don't know. But them getting their own studio set up and everything, it's clear that Sonic Mania worked out for them. And I hope that Sega realizes the talent there and they continue to hit them with more projects that they can, of course, get funding for, and then, of course, take money that they make from it, maybe make their own game. But cool nonetheless, and they better be on board, or at least Sega better get them on board for something like the next Sonic Mania if there is another one, because they did an awesome job on that one. And with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. We're going to start with the Switch overclocking test that has technically taken place here with some actual results. Now, the Switch overclocking is an interesting idea where, of course, hackers are pushing the Switch essentially in handheld mode. It seems more than likely because there's more room for improvement there, and we know the cooling is at least good going up to the docked results, right, for the frequency. We know, of course, the Switch can handle that, and in handheld mode, it shouldn't be too much different in terms of heat compared to the docked setup. The only difference would be probably battery life, and they do kind of talk about that a bit. But they tested Doom. Doom is a very good test, especially in handheld mode, because it has a dynamically scaling resolution, whereas, as you've probably seen in Digital Foundry, if you watch any of their videos, the resolution will change and alter as it's needed to try to steady the frame rate, essentially. And this is actually tested in a post on Reddit, as you're seeing here, where they talk about how they did change the frequency, as they have a before of 307 megahertz and an after of 768 megahertz when tested in Doom. This was actually posted up by Skull Kid Chris, and you're going to see some images here. So this first one is the before image at 307 megahertz, and it shows Doom 2016, and of course in handheld mode, it's not as blown up. It won't look as bad technically because it's a smaller screen and there's movement and everything. You're not going to be studying every little picture technically while you're playing in handheld mode. But if you shift from there over to 768 megahertz, which would be the overclock of twice the amount in terms of frequency, you're going to see at least a sharper image, and that's actually kind of cool. That's pretty exciting because, of course, that means that, let's say Nintendo does come out with some more powerful Switch, it wouldn't technically have to be that much more powerful to get more out of these games when it comes to games with dynamic resolution, and that's why it's a great thing that this has been kind of put into a lot of games now, because as hardware improves, you can see that. So let's say they come out with one that uses like a Parker chip, or it basically steps up in terms of what the chip can do, then you probably will see a better image overall, just because it'll hit the top, resolution, 720 in dock, 1080 in dock, 720 in handheld, just as an example. It'll look sharper than it would when it drops into like 360p or something in handheld mode. It's just going to look overall better, and of course, you'll probably get a steadier frame rate as well. That's why these games pretty much scale pretty well now when it comes to better hardware, and it's kind of cool to see that even the one now, overclocked, can get better results. But, of course, the question is, what about that battery life? Because it's still running on that 20 nanometer X1 that's not as efficient as like a 16 nanometer X2 or Parker chip. Well, the battery life does take a bit of a hit. They were saying on the post that going from 100 to 75% took a little less than 30 minutes, which means they're probably not even going to get 2 hours out of this thing when playing it. So probably an hour 45 before it starts telling you to plug your charger in or your battery in. But if you have like a portable battery bank, or you're near the wall, technically you could plug it in and it'd be fine most likely. We have to see if it's draining power faster than it can charge, though. That would kind of be a question there in terms of how fast it's ripping battery away. But it doesn't seem to have any issue when it comes to heat. They said it doesn't feel warm in your hand or anything, and that's actually kind of something I would expect, although people have talked about how in docked mode, their Switch does get fairly hot. Some people have talked about it warping and everything, but it doesn't look like it's anything like the Switch is going to catch on fire or something. I wouldn't worry about that. I did test myself. We talked about it here, and it actually had a pretty fair amount of headroom from where it shuts down. So heat, not really an issue for the frequencies that they're playing around with. It's mostly underclocked so that battery life would be within reason, most likely. Either way, cool results there. You can look down below in the source if you want to get some full screen images of these two comparison shots and see for yourself. Next up, let's talk about Crackdown 3. It's out this Friday. I'm going to be getting it on Game Pass and playing it mostly for the single player. I played the test that they had, the Wrecking Zone test. It was alright. It wasn't anything that crazy. Honestly, if it was just that and it was multiplayer focused, I probably wouldn't even play the thing. I'm definitely going to be playing it mostly for single player. After I beat it, then I'll move on and check out some other stuff. But let's say you're buying it for the multiplayer and you want to play with friends. Well, there's a weird situation here. This game's been in development for a long time, right? I mean, it's probably been in development since the Xbox One launched in 2013, because they showed off initially midway through 2014. So you figure they maybe took, 7 or 8 months to put a demo together, and that would probably place it, before then. And then maybe they were working on the cloud technology before then. So it's been in development for a long, long time. You figure they would have parties, a party system to play with your friends on launch. It doesn't appear to be the case. As a community manager, continued to post to different people who are asking questions that there would be no party system when it launches for the multiplayer, which means you wouldn't be able to invite people in and of course have a party and then go into matchmaking. You'd be going into matchmaking like by yourself basically like every time, which is weird. I mean, I kind of noticed that when people were playing, of course, that they weren't jumping into parties and everything. It seemed kind of odd, I guess, but yeah, it's been kind of confirmed. And then the Crackdown Twitter handle actually put out this tweet. Agents, we know you're eager to play Wrecking Zone with friends, and we'll be adding Xbox Live Party functionality in an upcoming title update along with other post-launch content. Thank you for your patience, and please stay tuned here for more info soon. That didn't go over that well, the tweet. You know what? I have to admit, I wouldn't expect it to go very well because they have two different icons that pop up. So obviously multiple teams worked on it. They kind of viewed it probably as two different games that kind of got just like stitched together right at the end. A multiplayer and then a single player icon. So you pick which one you want to go into and then you jump in. So the multiplayer icon technically would tell me that they have their own little focus on multiplayer, and they didn't, at least at launch, put that functionality in for the party system, which is super weird considering it's Xbox Live, and that's kind of one of their big things that they push is playing together and online and everything. And yeah, they have very good online, but like what's going on? How did this happen? I mean, the game didn't get rushed. It's been in development for a long, long time, and I'm not sure what happened here. Yes, I know the cloud was technically integrated. There was talks that they rebooted the entire development at one point in time because of the cloud computing and everything that was going on. I don't know how you missed this one. It's very weird. It sounds like they're going to be adding it post-launch, but I understand why people weren't happy with them not having what should be a core feature to play with your friends in an online multiplayer game like that, like just absent. I mean, this is like Switch levels of stuff when it comes to online play, and this is coming from Microsoft, who's supposed to have this stuff like down pat. So I don't know. It's like super weird. Let me know what you think about that down below. I mean, I'm getting it on Game Pass and I'll play single player, so I guess I'm not like buying it, but man, that's pretty disappointing. And our last bit of news, let's talk about an interesting shakeup at Sony, and I'm trying to figure out why this happened. It's very weird. You remember we talked about how John Codera was being promoted to president of SIE, or Sony Interactive Entertainment, and it sounded like he was going to be kind of calling the shots and moving forward into the PlayStation 5. And then they had Jim Ryan, who was like the deputy president, basically like the second in command next to John Codera in that section of Sony. Well, they're switching roles. It's very odd. Here's actually the press release that you're seeing here, and they describe that Sony Corporation and Sony Interactive Entertainment, or SIE, has announced that SIE Deputy President Jim Ryan will be appointed President and CEO of SIE effective April 1st, 2019, with current SIE President and CEO John Codera will dedicate his focus on creating innovative user experiences and further enhancing the network area as Deputy President of SIE. So I don't know why completely, unless Codera is just not cut out for the role, because this was fast. Remember, this happened last year, and now they're switching roles on him, putting Jim Ryan ahead of him, and this is where it gets a little concerning. I'll explain why. Jim Ryan doesn't really see the benefit to backwards compatibility. We've been talking about how rumors and patents are coming out that the possibility of the PlayStation 5 being backwards compatible with all of Sony's legacy hardware, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PS3, PS4 should be a given, I think, but Jim Ryan doesn't really see the benefit in that. He's been quoted several times, famously, in several big headlines that you've probably read, where he's like, who wants to play that when it comes to backwards compatibility? And I get it, not everyone's going to use backwards compatibility, but it is a very large, I think, feature just to have, right? I think it definitely adds to the value, and it gives the system a library day one. Like, if the PlayStation 5 is fully backwards compatible with PS4, all those PS4 games, and then maybe some that even come out post PS5 launch, that tends to happen, would be compatible with it. You won't have to worry about, oh, I hope they make a PS5 version of this game. No, it'll just be there. And the fact that the PS3 library is kind of off on its own still, unless you have PlayStation Now, is, again, concerning. I would have liked to have seen Metal Gear Solid 4 just be able to have me pop a disc into the PS5 and it just play, maybe in 4K. There's some cool benefits there that we could get. So it's interesting to see Jim Ryan get pretty much promoted, jumped basically over John Codera, and I feel like this is because the PS5 is coming up and they need Jim Ryan to lead them into it. Codera might not be cut out for it. I mean, would Jim Ryan have okayed the PlayStation Classic? Probably not. No, I don't think he would have. I think he would have said, who wants to play that? Why would we release that? And then they wouldn't have released it, which they actually would have dodged a bullet with that one. So maybe Codera okayed the PlayStation Classic, or at least the idea of it. It went out. It didn't do well. And Jim Ryan was like, I told you guys, look, if you want me to run the PlayStation 5 launch correctly, you got to put me in charge. And they flipped them. That's all we can really come up with. That's what a lot of people are thinking, but it's hard to say. I don't think they'll ever outright tell us, but I think Codera's a bit more cut out for the live services side with the networking and everything. And I hate to admit, I think Jim Ryan would launch the PS5 better. Maybe they need him more for that. I just hope it doesn't affect the idea or the plans of backwards compatibility just because of his views on it, but we'll see. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit the like button. It really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, whether it's crackdowns, weird lack of online parties with Xbox Live. I don't get that from an Xbox first-party game. Very strange. Then what about the Switch overclocking? I think it's a cool look into what a revision or slightly more powerful revision could be if Nintendo does that. I think Switch Mini makes more sense first, but if they do, you might get a better looking Doom. Maybe Mario Odyssey is very like locked solid at 60 with 1080p and everything. Zelda runs really well. It's very interesting to see that, yes, just a simple overclock can do it. So if Nintendo actually gets there at a hardware level, we could have some even better looking games on the Switch. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.